Sometimes we know where we're going to spend the night. Sometimes we don't. He bent to the ground again and ducked under the belly of the Huey with a can of sand in his hand. For a few seconds I watched only his feet as he brought the can of the fuel drain valve. After soaking the sand in kerosene, he climbed back out holding the fueled burner in front of him. If we know for sure before we take off that we'll be sleeping in these conditions, we warn, he set the burner on the ground. If we don't know anything, we don't say anything. He reached into the box of dry rations and found another can. This he circled the commotion around him with his brown eyes, as if he were seeing it for the first time. This is an example of when we failed to plan ahead. But we could get hit by mortar fire here and lose most of the vehicles, couldn't we? I persisted and was determined to get a reasoned response. He punched several triangular holes under the top edge of his burner. That way the flame could burn if you put a can of water on top. Reasoning that everything was ready, he placed the burner and water jar 10 feet from the Huey and lit the fire. Dark orange flames burst out from under the can, the burner beginning to smoke. He looked up from squatting next to his creation and said, "Yes." Grabbing the water jar by the lid that had been bent back, he carefully placed it on the burner, placing it slightly to the side so that the flame licked one side of the jar. Small bubbles instantly formed on the side where the fire danced. "Does it make any sense that we're stuck here like this?" I asked. "If we lost our cars, we'd be weeks or even months back. Since we're talking about time, a little morning late seems less risky." The water came to a boil. He removed the jar from the flame, using a small piece of cardboard to protect his fingers from the hot lid. Carefully he set the jar on the ground, ripped open the top corner of the foil bag of instant coffee, and poured the granules into the water. The brown granules dissolved, and a distinctive aroma wafted to my nostrils. "You're right," he said. "So why are we here?" I repeated in confusion. Faris added sugar and cream to the drink and rose to his feet, holding the cup of steaming coffee in his hands. He took a cautious sip and snorted sharply. "I don't know," he smiled. Noticing the surprised look on my face, he handed me the coffee and added, "Here, take a sip." The sun was setting behind the pass. Leaving Faris with his coffee, I went to find Ressler. I stopped behind my helicopter where Liz was busy eating dinner. Our Drapac container was practically empty except for a few lonely cans of scrambled eggs, packs of cutlery, 2 or 3 mini packs of cigarettes, and about 15 canned P38 knives. Not one complete dinner. Liz was squatting next to the Huey, discussing World War II with his fellow former Luftwaffe pilot, Gottler. I told him I'd come over later and left. Gary had a much wider selection of food, half a container of unopened rations, so I dined with him. So, let's see. We've got beef and noodles, beef stew, spaghetti and meatballs, chicken meat or scrambled eggs, Gary listed, standing in the cargo hold and rummaging through a box. Chicken meat I chose. Got it. We ate and watched the last rays of light disappear over the pass. The mosquitoes were starting to wake up, so Gary and I pulled our sleeves down. It was hot and stuffy in the valley, and rain was gathering. We talked about the war. I told him about how Liz drove us out of the drop zone with 12 grunts on board. He told me about the time he got hit in the cabin lantern. I'm flying like this, and all of a sudden there's a hole in the plexiglass in front of my face. In a split second, he pointed to his palm, holding it out in front of him like a windshield. Not a sound, just out of nowhere. I was beginning to think it was the last thing I'd ever see in my life. I felt like a complete moron. But I asked Nate to see if I had any blood on my face or head. When he said no, I realized I hadn't been killed. And now I know for sure, if I get hit in the head, I won't even notice. It's all very quick. Nate's face peeked out of the darkness. He'd lit his pipe. Nate had been coming toward us for a while. He squatted down and puffed loudly. The pipe smelled nice. Once again, I mentally noted that it was time to give up cigarettes and switch to a pipe. Without noticing it, I smoked 3 or 4 packs a day. The bowl of the pipe hissed. Nate's triangular face, with its sharp features and small, serious mouth, lit up when he took a drag. When the pipe went out, the face disappeared, and only the outline of his headdress and shoulders were visible in the moonlight filtering through the clouds. He continued to puff silently. His presence reassured Gary and me, his extensive experience as a helicopter pilot making us tremble. He had fought in the old 11th Airborne Division and had managed to survive a helicopter crash. "Did Gary tell you about the line we grabbed today?" He finally spoke up. "Yeah, you were lucky," I said. "That's for sure. They say it's only going to get worse. They say it's going to get worse." "Where'd you hear that?" I asked. Wendell read it in the book street without joy. Fucking Wendell again. The guy who wrote it knows how the Viet Cong acted against the French. He says the cavalry will get theirs when we move farther north. He took another drag, but the light disappeared beneath the top crust of tobacco, and only a hiss was heard in the darkness. "And how are we going to get ours?" Gary asked. I could hear him crumpling up the trash left over from dinner. He broke all the plastic utensils. He says that when we get deeper north, the landing zones will have enough room for 1 or 2 helicopters at a time. The Kongs will dig a hole there and camouflage it with bushes. During our fire training, a couple people will hide there. They'll wait out the fire and catch us on approach, firing machine guns right at the cockpits, Nate explained quietly. It was as if he'd had some kind of special training that allowed him to accept the existence of such things without even a hint of fear. He even had a book to back up all his theories. He didn't offer any ways around this trap, so I decided to give my side of the story. What should we do in such a case? How do we get around the trap? We don't. Unless you keep your eyes open and look for suspicious bushes in the drop zone, he said, as if it were just another key maneuver that we snot-nosed rookies had to learn, while the experienced fighters were just looking for suspicious bushes on approach. I thought about the landing zones, trying to remember any bushes. I remembered the confusion, the smell of gunpowder, the howls of grunts, the frenzy in the communications channel. But bushes? The bushes bothered me the least. How could anyone even keep all this in their head? What unlearned lesson would prove fatal to me? Yeah, you can't keep track of everything I said, hoping my companions would tell me to relax about the bushes in the face of a ready-made solution. Yeah, Resler agreed. Remember that giant stretch, Bob? Yeah, I smoked my 3rd pack. Tell Nate. Bob was in a different car, but we both saw it. We were about to land when the pilot of the attack chopper said he saw something suspicious. This was last month. Nate interrupted. When you told me about the bushes, I remembered I couldn't see where the pilot was pointing. It wasn't until he asked us if we could see a wire or bowstring stretched across the drop zone that I realized. And that's when I saw it. The moon occasionally showed between the clouds, illuminating Gary's grinning face. The guy said look and dived toward the clearing while we circled around. He fired a rocket into the very center, and the explosion tore the bowstring. Suddenly a large stick or pole whistled over the clearing like a huge arrow. Shh, I'm freaking out. Gary and I laughed, but Nate only puffed on his pipe. He suddenly stood up, whipped the pipe out with the palm of his hand, and stuffed it into his breast pocket, leaving the bowl sticking out. Well, boys, you'll have to develop the same powers of observation as this combat chopper pilot if you want to survive the war. With this invaluable friendly advice that raised questions, he turned and left good night. He disappeared into the night to visit the others. I was busy picking up the trash left over from dinner when Gary spoke up. Look, I can't figure out what's bugging me about this guy. Maybe it's the tube. My father didn't trust people who smoked a pipe. It rained all night. The 4 of us crammed into the Huey, trying to sleep. The cargo bay doors were open for ventilation. I was lying on my stomach facing the open door, using a rolled-up field shirt as a pillow. Liz was lying on her back by the other door, pulling her field jacket over her face. Reacher was crowing on a stretched nylon bench at our feet. The machine gunner was half sitting, half lying leaning against the wall of the pocket behind his machine gun. He leaned his head forward heavily, resting his chin on his chest. You'd think Reacher had gotten the best bed, as if he hadn't. The bench was designed for 4 separate sets of buttocks, not one stretched-out body. The aluminum dividers that normally separated seated people would have rested against the bones of any poor guy who had to sleep there. But there was no alternative. The rain drove us inside because we had no tents. I couldn't sleep. The air was heavy and damp. The rain didn't cool it, it only saturated it with moisture. Occasional drops of water hit the floor, breaking near my face and splashing right on my nose. I moved toward the open door, hoping the rain would deter the mosquitoes. The mosquito repellent Reacher had shared with me only worked for the first few minutes, and then it lost its effect. "Hey, Reacher," I whispered. "You awake?" His sullen voice clearly conveyed the agony he was feeling on the bench. "Can I have some more of your mosquito repellent?" He sat up in the moonlight, pulled a plastic bottle from his breast pocket, handed it to me, and laid back down with a sigh. The remedy was barely enough. I squeezed a few drops onto my palms and rubbed them against each other, wiped my face. If the mosquitoes didn't stick to my face, I could sleep. I smeared the rest of the product on my hair and arms and glanced over at Liz. He was lying there, covered by his jacket, asleep. In the cloudy moonlight, I glanced at the clock 2 in the morning. I held the bottle up to Reacher. He silently got up and took it. As I lay back down, I heard gunfire in the distance. It lasted only a minute, and then it was quiet. Maybe some grumpy guy got overexcited. Or maybe it was the beginning of an attack. I imagined what our company's position looked like from the air. 32 black silhouettes of helicopters against the light background of the ground. The grunts were positioned around the perimeter of the camp, some hiding in camp tents trying to sleep, others staring out into the grey foliage and wide awake. As I pictured the scene, I couldn't decide which was worse, a wave of Viet Cong fleeing into the attack or mortar fire. A mosquito bit me on the neck and brought me back to the dank aluminum floor. Damn those evil little mosquito brains. I decided to think about how much I hated mosquitoes, hoping that the thoughts would begin to exude a hatred and disgust that would scare away all the nastiness. I thought for a while about how I would torture the mosquitoes, tear off their wings, flatten their heads, pull their legs out, and they stopped biting me. Really, they flew away. Maybe I've made a great discovery. We won't have to take malaria pills anymore. Does intense hatred drive mosquitoes away? What happens when I fall asleep? Will they come back? Of course they will, and with reinforcements. What we should do, I pondered, is call a meeting, a rally, and focus on hating mosquitoes all together at the same time. We could herd them into one huge swarm, a pack of terrified nasties. I imagined reaching out to that swarm, grabbing a whole handful of mosquitoes and clenching my fist. Their screams of terror and pleas for mercy made me smile. I reached for another handful. The smell of coffee woke me up. Liz was already up. I got up and looked around. Reacher was gone. It was 5:30 on the clock. I blinked for a minute as my brain tried to join my body's awakening. My face itched. My arms itched. The mosquitoes had won. Liz was squatting on his side of the Huey, boiling water. Over his head I could see the camp coming into motion. Little orange tongues of flame were dancing, and grey shadows began to move across the dull camouflage colouring of the helicopters in the morning haze. I tumbled out my door, rounded the helicopter on my way to Liz's, and within minutes I had my own coffee boiling. By 7:00 we had all had breakfast, drank our coffee, smoked a cigarette each, inspected the helicopters, and were ready to get the hell out of camp. 3 hours later, the crews were still hanging around their Hueys, dozing or staring dazedly into nothing, like me. Faris and Shaker gathered us for a briefing. The fighting in Happy Valley had stopped. The Viet Cong had slipped away under the cover of night. The 50 caliber machine guns had gone silent too. Perhaps they had been destroyed, although there was no trace of them on the ground, according to the grunts. All action was postponed until better times. Liz and I and 7 other crews were to spend the day doing ass and junk hauling between units. The rest of us were sent home to dig trenches and uproot stumps. That sounded like good news to me. I hoped the Viet Cong would continue in the same direction, and I was ready to do anything but destroy stumps of immense size. When we finished distributing supplies to the scout teams, it got so dark outside that we had to turn on the landing lights. I hovered over the uneven terrain of the 3rd row, searching for an empty parking spot. I passed several spots with other companies' license plates. Now, at the beginning of each parking space was a perforated steel plate with the unit number painted on it. When I finally found an empty spot with our number on it, it turned out that we were half a mile out of company territory. On the way to the parking lot, Liz called the operations headquarters, and a small truck was sent out to pick us up. We were the last ones back, according to the driver. The sun had long since set, but there was still a slight blush in the west. The cold light of the street lights reflected in the road slush. The four of us sat under a tarp stretched over the back of the truck, watching the Hueys disappear from view as the car tumbled through the mud. When the truck stopped in front of the headquarters tent, we climbed out and said goodbye to Reacher and the machine gunner, who had 2 helicopter gunships to haul back to the weapons tent. Liz and I headed over to the tent to hand over a sheet of logbook paper that had 12 entries in a column. The staff officers used this sheet to keep track of the flying hours of pilots, crew members, and the machines themselves. "Here are latecomers," Captain Owens said with fake joy. "We're not late," Liz objected. "It's just that the mission was delayed." "Just kidding," Ron Owens replied without a smile. Liz handed the officer our written trip sheet. "I'm just really tired." "A hot ration is what we need right now," I added. Owens said. "The cafeteria closed an hour ago." He looked confused. "Did the cook put anything aside for us?" Liz asked. "We'll have to ask him," Owens said, stammering. He'd forgotten to ask the cook to put food aside for us, but it hadn't occurred to him to apologize. We were furious. It would have been nice if he'd admitted the mistake, but no, he tried to get out of it. Owens and his buddy, Mr. White, were the only pilots in the Air Assault Pilot Unit who didn't fly combat missions. The next morning we encountered an extremely depressing example of the abysmal performance of the intelligence gathering system. Liz and I were the last helicopter in a formation of 16 slicks. The entire battalion was loaded with infantrymen, and in the air they were to surround a detachment of Viet Cong, who, according to our intelligence, were heading through the Valley of Happiness into the Bong Sun Valley closer to the coast. Passing the pass, we turned toward the northern part of the valley. After traveling 20 miles, the 3 Slick Rock companies split up to land in different areas around the target. Our escort, in the form of attack helicopters, also split into 3 groups for cover. As the formation descended for the approach, I looked ahead, scouting out the landing zone. No trees or hills this time, bare ground, dried rice paddies, a sandy plain with patches of grass. It was hard to believe that a detachment of Viet Cong could be hiding in such a place. The lead vehicles flew closer, and the machine gunners opened fire through the doors. Their tracers pounded the ground in vain. At an altitude of 100 feet, about 1 mile from a lone tree, I spotted 2 figures racing toward the tree across the sand. More than 30 machine guns were trying to hit them. As we got close enough that I could see the sand flying around under their feet, one of the fleeing men dropped his rifle and turned around to pick it up. He looked around frantically. The sky was filled with tracers flying in his direction. As he reached for his rifle, the sand beneath his feet boiled and he flew down in a swarm of bullets. He must have died before he touched the ground. His frightened comrade kept running. As we flew after him, more machine guns joined the general boom. I watched in amazement as the sand bubbled around the runner. "Surrender," I yelled. "Surrender, you stupid bastard." Realizing he couldn't reach the tree, he dived into the only available cover, a small sand pit. On-board machine gunners from all the surrounding vehicles plowed the ground around him, but Liz wouldn't let our gunners open fire. The fucking dumbass gook, the bravest man I'd ever seen, lay there with rifle in hand, aiming at our entire airborne battalion, oblivious to the flashes around him. Probably even fired a couple shots before he was blown to bits. The result of the whole mission? A couple of Viet Cong. It felt like the recon team was studying maps upside down. Connors assumed the scouts were getting their intel from smuggled Chinese fortune cookies. In a letter to patients dated October 15th, I recounted how Nate was hit a second time. He and Kaiser were flying along Route 19, busily hauling ass and junk, when suddenly a random bullet hitting the engine propelled them toward the ground. Riker and Gottler immediately followed and picked them up near the highway. Before flying back out, they removed the radios and machine guns from the downed Huey to keep the Viet Cong from adding to their growing collection of American equipment. Nate puffed his pipe proudly as he recounted his adventure. Once again he had managed to cheat death. Everyone agreed on one thing: the story could have ended badly if it hadn't been for the second car behind. I decided to stay as high as possible, even in safe zones. I also mentioned being thrown out of a planned vacation to Saigon. The plan was simple: when the helicopters needed extra maintenance, the pilots would get a chance to stop by Saigon for at least a day. Taking turns transferring the helicopters to the large Ton Sun Nut Technical Air Base in Saigon, each pilot would have a chance to visit the city at some point. These trips lasted from 1 to 3 days. My name was put on the rosters for the next trip, a one-day vacation. Overjoyed, I managed to pack my bags in a few hours, get Marston to trim my hedgehog, and collect a shopping list from everyone in the tent. I was happy to get away from the cavalry, if only for a day. But the plan had changed. The trip was extended to 3 days. Someone felt that a newly minted warrant officer didn't deserve the gift of a 3-day vacation, so 2 captains were put in charge of the helicopter. Farris was extremely unhappy with the sudden change of crew. Williams, the commander whom I had impressed with my firing on the helicopter's dashboard, probably had something to do with the decision. While the 2 captains took to the skies, I grabbed my axe and joined the work crew in the Gulf area. My opinion of our company commander had deteriorated greatly. On October 17th, Williams admitted me to the right chair. Admission to the right seat meant that I had gained enough experience in Huey flying and airborne operations to become a crew chief. A 5-minute-old warrior, no less. I ignored the dirt and dust for the rest of the day. Toiling away on the company lot. It was time for another vacation trip to Saigon. And this time Riker and I were sent. A 3-day trip. Instead of flying directly 250 miles over Viet Cong territory in a malfunctioning Huey, we went first to Quai Nhong and turned south there, intending to sneak along the coast to Vung Tau. From there it was only 20 miles to a major city. We were going at 5,000 feet, where the air was cool and where bullets no longer reached us a perfect 2-hour flight. We were both anticipating a jaunt around Saigon. After all, ordinary guys sometimes get lucky. The flight mechanic and the gunner were happy too. We were cracking jokes over the intercom and discussing what we were going to do in the city. At such moments, even the cavalry stopped straining. As we cruised at low altitude over the city toward Ton Sun Nut, Saigon seemed like a sea of tin roofs stretching for miles ahead. As we hovered 100 feet above their shacks and gardens, people from below waved at us. "Do you see it?" I asked. "See, they're waving at us." "So," Riker replied. "They're obviously happy to see us. They must have heard about us busting our asses under fire. These happy and grateful people will give us a warm welcome when we land." "I'm sure they will," Riker nodded. We left the Huey at the technical base, jumped into a cab, and gazed longingly at the scenery on the way into town. The driver had clearly flown in the ranks of kamikazes before. His overtaking technique was simple. He would lay his chest on the horn, jump from lane to lane, and go all the way. The kamikaze code did not allow retreat under any circumstances. We were put in a hotel room with peeling paint on the walls, without windows, but with a toilet in the shower. Compared to the forbidding tents and earthen floors of our camp, everything looked simply luxurious. We showered and put on our wrinkled civilian clothes. No off-duty uniforms. I had a pair of brown cotton pants and a green plaid shirt. The loose, crumpled white t-shirt emphasized Len's freckles as well as his slight figure. For the first time in 2 months, we were wearing something other than field uniforms. Yeah, and we saw it too. "Shall we look around?" I suggested it. "Let's go." I opened the door just as the young second lieutenant walked by. He stopped, leaned silently against the door jamb, and looked inside. So room," he said. "You don't like the hotel?" I asked. "No, that's not what I mean," he smiled. "I live here. I've just never seen this room. It's pretty crappy." "It's fine with me," Riker interjected. "It's fine for a one-night stand. or for the rank and file. But I usually try not to buy a place like this. Buy? I asked again. Yeah, I buy and rent hotels and apartments for the army. I'm a real estate officer. A real estate officer. I was amazed. Well, he confirmed, someone has to do it. You guys are from the cavalry, aren't you? I thought he'd noticed the horse patches on our uniforms when we were checking in. Yeah, how'd you guess? Riker asked. Peeked on the counter, he grinned. Seems to me you've got a hot situation up in the mountains. We only hear about the cavalry up here. It's boring up here. No fighting. He wore a starched jungle uniform, polished boots on his feet. Because of the shortage, we had neither. My army boots were starting to rot right on my feet, so I was looking for a new pair. Would you be able to buy uniforms and boots in Saigon? I asked. Buy? He looked at me in surprise. I think so. But they gave me mine. Didn't they give you a jungle uniform in the cavalry? He was quiet. Come down to my room and I'll show you something. You were going out anyway, weren't you? In his room we saw 12 sets of jungle uniforms, neatly hung at equal distances from each other on a clothes rack, neater than in the closet of an officer's cadet. Under the sets of uniforms on the floor were 2 pairs of jungle boots. They gave you all this? I didn't hide my feelings. Of course. As far as I know, we got more than we needed. I don't know why you didn't get anything from the cavalry. I'm sure you'll get it soon, he smiled. But none of us smiled back. Well, what about this room? Isn't it better than yours? Does yours have a toilet or an ass? There's a toilet in the shower room, I said. That's something. I hate sitting on the toilet. How about you? He asked. I'd never had to use an eyeglass, so I couldn't answer him. Well, I began. We're used to the toilets outside. Yeah, Riker interrupted me. We shit in sawed-off 55-gallon drums. When they're full, we pour kerosene on the shit and burn it. Smells nasty. Holy shit, he was impressed. You guys are really good at what you do. I'm jealous of you guys. The center of the action. Don't just sit there, he paused. But he continued, somebody's got to stick around and do shit. I advised those assholes to stop sending us to Saigon. Len exclaimed as we left the hotel. If they don't, the rumors of a fucking made-up uniform shortage will play tricks on the morons. I agree. I seconded. There will be a general revolt and everyone will desert. I laughed. I'm ready myself. Heck, I'll desert right now to save myself from having to go back to camp and start a mutiny. I'm ready too, yelled Riker. I'm a deserter? We laughed. The Vietnamese passed us on the sidewalk and smiled nervously. I'm sure in their minds we were too drunken, near white-hot Americans. Happiness swept over us, and we hurried to the bicycle rickshaw stand at the intersection, singing at the top of our voices, we're deserters, we're deserters, we're deserters, until we were let into the back seat of one of those pedal-powered cabs. Len handed the driver a slip of paper with the name of the hotel where the officer's home was located. As I recall, it was at the International Hotel. The young rickshaw driver looked at the slip of paper and nodded. He pedaled tirelessly without touching the seat with his butt. He's in good shape, I noted. Probably fights for the Viet Cong at night. A blue U.S. Air Force bus sailed by. It had safety nets in front of each window. Yeah, you can't put a grenade in them, Riker said. Suddenly I realized that the back seat of our cab could easily hold as many grenades as I wanted. The thought made me tense up. Too many enemies around. I was about to dash out of this Orient Express when the Viet Cong driver turned toward us with a smile. We stopped. He must have read my mind. Dava no hai, he said, or something like that. I translated the phrase as that's it, Jai, you're to die for. What he actually said was that we had arrived. Len and I climbed out and paid him off. He took the money and rolled away for ammunition, no less. We passed the Republic of Vietnam Army military police guard at the front doors. We took a leisurely escalator upstairs and found ourselves under a darkening sky on an open terrace on the very roof of the hotel. Part of the hotel served as a barracks for American officers stationed in the city, and the rooftop garden belonged to their club. Magnificent Saigon at night spread out beyond the low parapet. For a quarter, the bar poured anything you asked for. Civilians and servicemen scurried around the white ladies. They drank a lot and talked loudly. Their voices made me very uneasy. How could they not think that such carelessness could provoke enemy fire? As the bourbon ran through my veins, I began to take my surroundings more easily. Intoxicated, relaxed, and hungry, Riker and I sat down at a table overlooking the city. We ordered blood steak and baked potatoes with sour cream, accompanied by a huge salad of fresh, crisp lettuce and juicy tomatoes that looked like they had been grown on a farm near my hometown in Florida. The events of the rest of the evening were lost to memory. I know we were both pretty drunk, truth be told. I got many times more drunk because Riker at least remembered the way to the hotel. Rising early the next morning, we went to the garrison store at the naval base to buy some junk the guys at camp had requested. They had made a full-fledged department store for the Saigon warriors. The goods there were of better quality and cheaper than in many specialty stores in America. Nikon cameras for $150. A Roberts reel-to-reel tape recorder for $120. There were clothes, tools, canned goods, books, and even packages of feminine pads. Riker suggested that tonight we go back to that restaurant I liked so much last night. Yesterday? I didn't know what he was talking about. Yeah. Remember how many snails you ate? I never ate snails, I said. But a vague memory was stirring in my head. Maybe you ate about 30 last night alone. And then there's the girl who loves you. A girl? Look, Len, I'm a married man. So am I, he smirked. But I get a hard-on even when I'm far away from home. And you don't have to fuck everyone, you know that. Girls can be nice to sit around and talk to for a change. After dinner that night, I was really sick. By midnight, I couldn't get off the toilet. Len took me to the naval hospital, where I was diagnosed with dysentery. I spent the rest of my vacation lying in bed. The next morning I got into the Huey in a very bad state of mind. I flew as a front seat passenger, and while Len piloted the helicopter, I stared longingly at the tin roofs that gradually changed to rice paddies and jungle as we approached the highlands and the cavalry camp. On October 22nd, a social and political magazine published an exceptionally optimistic cover story on how things were going in Vietnam. The magazine came out while Len and I were in Saigon. It was read by absolutely everyone. The article, written for us, and for all Americans, summarized the successes of our army in Vietnam. 3 months ago, the Viet Cong were preparing for a decisive blow, and South Vietnam was preparing to surrender. But now South Vietnam, intoxicated with a sense of dignity and power, radiated confidence and incredible change from the previous summer. The reason for this amazing turn of events was one of the fastest and largest combat expansions in the history of military engagement. I read again about how we were cutting down bushes and stumps with machetes alone to keep our helicopters from kicking up dust on the airstrip. Lest we get the feeling that we were being groomed for employment with the South Vietnamese Parks Department, the article talked about how we were fighting for Happy Valley as a force of 2,500 men. The article ended with a spiel toward the communists who made South Vietnam the first domino chip in a chain called Southeast Asia. Now, according to the authors, the communists should have had doubts. The United States had accepted the challenge, so not only South Vietnam but all Southeast Asian countries would be gradually strengthened by the build-up of the famous American technology, facilities, and soldiers. Even the mediocre process of landing infantrymen at Quy Nhon was described in the article as an influx of brutal and fearless recruits pouring ashore from an entire flotilla of transport ships. The article made no mention of our effectiveness. For all the maneuverability of the troops, the Viet Cong were in control. We fought by their rules. The overall tone of the article created an impression that was hard to shake off. Even I began to believe that it was only the cavalry that was in trouble, that on the whole we were doing well. About the same time as this article came out, on October 19th, the siege of the small camp of Plime, which was 60 miles west of us, in the valley of Nha Drang, began. At the time the attack seemed like something insignificant, but it was later destined to become the event that led to one of the largest battles between the cavalry and the North Vietnamese army. John Hall spent most of his evenings getting drunk with Jim Staughter. But unlike Jim, John was never seen sleeping off hangovers in clothes lockers or cardboard boxes in the pantry tent. They drank for different reasons. Storter sought solace at the bottom of a glass because his wife was fucking everyone in the States while he was dodging Viet Cong bullets. John's problems were in Vietnam. He believed the cavalry was testing his fate by trying to prove the effectiveness of airborne maneuvers. After the first few sorties, he decided that if the Viet Cong didn't kill him, the cavalry certainly would. We can't land in hot zones, Mason. One evening, John sat down next to my bunk, leaning his back against the tent pole. In the 11th Airborne, we were trained to move infantry and supplies from one safe zone to another. Now we're landing in such a scorcher you'd think we were flying in armoured fortresses or something. Hell, we don't even have body armour. So how do we avoid the dangerous landing zones? I asked. We need to land infantry close to the battle, not in the middle of it. It's not only us who suffer, but the infantrymen themselves. The Viet Cong always seem to know where we're going to land, I objected. Did you see those huge sticks in the last landing zone? We recently landed in an area piled with hundreds of 10-foot poles. The day before we landed, this clearing was empty. How do we know they won't see through our decision to land farther away? John took a sip of scotch from his flask and held it out to me. I declined. Look, the Viet Cong are sitting on point X. While they're there, they know the Americans could land near them at any minute. The Viet Cong commander, while at point X, sends some of his guys to keep an eye out for any nearby clearings that he thinks are good for us to land. He may even start a battle to draw us into a trap. It's a good strategy. If we attack him, he has a chance to jump out of the ambush when we're most vulnerable, when we're in the choppers. Suppose, so I said. But like I said, if he knows exactly where we're going to land, like he did yesterday, we'll always land in dangerous areas until we reveal the source of their information. Spies? Absolutely, I replied. Try asking for a South Vietnamese good guy Idaho from any of our cheerful interpreters who are always running around. See, we have to coordinate everything with the Vietnamese. So all the information is translated and passed on to the Gooks. So where do you think the leak is? The Pentagon. John downed another cap of whiskey. Hopeless. If we can't pick a landing zone in secret from the Viet Cong, then what's the point of all this? We need to press on, take territory and hold it. Fuck these constant small area landings, he rose abruptly. Fuck it. His face showed anger and frustration. It's not all bad, John. Things are looking up. We have a chance to end this war, I tried to make a joke to cheer him up. The press says we're going to win. When the Gooks read the new article, they'll surrender right away. Nobody argues with the fucking press. He smiled grimly. My wit didn't work. Okay, Mason, I'm out of here. He turned to leave, but stopped suddenly. Look, if you decide to sell your Derringer, I'll buy it. The next day, even John started to smile. We flew behind the infantry into Happy Valley without encountering a single sniper bullet. Charlie didn't react, as if they had actually read that article. We thought we had won a victory there. The threat of death seemed to have finally disappeared, and we got naked. We flew unimpeded around the location, along Route 19 and through Happy Valley. The Viet Cong couldn't cope with our power, had an epiphany, and were about to surrender. I was in a great mood. I had passed the crew chief exam and had been baptized in combat, and the Viet Cong were retreating. My confidence was building, for I was a player on the team that was ahead, and I was so pleased with my suddenly increased chances of surviving the war that even the alert just before dinner that night did not spoil my mood. What's more, when I returned from the flight where everyone screwed up, I wrote Patience an enthusiastic letter. It is officially my last positive letter from Vietnam. We were put on alert a couple minutes before dinner. We had to fly in to pick up some squads of infantry. We rushed to the helicopters, kicked up a terrible foul, all yelling, "Where's my chopper? Where are we going? Give me your call signs." Damn, I'm up to my ears in mud. There was a complete fuss, because someone ordered to fly out, but did not explain anything. Figuring that the first car up in the air was the Link commander, we soared up like a bunch of blind gnats and headed off into the sunset. The Link commander asked for some chopper to guide him to the drop zone, but flew after the wrong car. When we landed in the wrong landing zone, the commander discovered his mistake and zipped away to find the right place. Since he didn't bother to give a command over the comms, all the remaining helicopters rushed after him. Unless you take part in this, you can hardly appreciate the spectacle of 7 helicopters trying to fly information behind a squad leader who thinks he is flying alone. Hooray! We found the right place. Needless to say, it was an alert flight, so we sat on the ground for about half an hour waiting for the eager, ready-to-go Marines. While we waited, the joyful hooligan pilots of the company got together and belted out a song. On the bell tower he stood and pissed on people's heads, but the people couldn't. Piss on him back. Amen. After this inspiring chant, we saddled up our war horses and rode through the air, pushing the throttle to the limit, to the very limit, like real reckless cavalry. In fact, we sang this song that night in camp when we got back, not during the mission. It was our company's long-time anthem. The siege of Plym in the Yardrang Valley was in full swing, and inactivity reigned in our battalion. But it should not be thought that the lack of fighting and the hauling of ass and junk around the camp pleased us much. This period of relative quiet seemed to last forever. No, we didn't want to fight, it was just that if there was no one to fight, why not go home? As we got used to the constant landings, even the grunts began to slack off. Once, when we were loading before the flight, a soldier with an M79 grenade launcher climbed aboard. He slammed the butt of the weapon against the floor of the cargo hold, and the gun went off. The grenade pierced the roof of my Huey and flew between the rotating blades. Seconds later it spiraled down through the blades and landed next to the helicopter, 5 feet from my door. The grenade misfired. When I turned around to yell at the stupid grunt, I saw myself, smoking gun in hand, the same idiotic grin on my face. But I had Wrestler with me, who kicked the guy's ass. The weapons technician later explained to me that a grenade has to travel several feet to spin up and detonate. Such a quick encounter with the roof stopped that process. Anyway, from that point on I started checking the fuses on all M79s before allowing them on board. We took these soldiers to Lima for their 100th distribution on the 100th combat sortie to the Valley of Happiness. They landed, and we were ordered to haul ammunition, fuel and food for the infantry. Most of the cargo was suspended, so I got a chance to practice. I'd only hauled suspended loads once with Connors, and that was stumps. Right, they've got the ropes off the donkey. Here we go, Liz commanded. They called them 4-wheel drive cars. I lifted the helicopter 25 feet above the dried rice paddies and went into hover. One soldier stood on the roof of the Ishak and held a knot from which 4 support cables diverged. Another soldier stood 50 feet away from his comrade and helped me navigate in the air. I sat in the left seat. I pitched forward, and the soldier with the knot disappeared into the drop window between my legs as I flew over it. The gusty wind from my blades fluttered the uniforms of the assembled Gurkhas, blurring their outlines. The caring counsellor in front was trying to position our hovering beast over the Ishak, making hand gestures that he had obviously just made up himself. He touched his nose. I yelled, "What the fuck does that even mean?" I wanted to show Lisa that I understood the situation. "It's okay, Bob. You're aligned fine," Liz reassured me. "Reacher, go outside and see what the fuck is going on out there. That asshole's bouncing around like an opera conductor." I couldn't get enough of him. "Yes, sir." Reacher lay on his belly and hung half off the edge of the cargo hold, holding on to his safety strap. 3 feet to the left, 5 down. Look at him. Now he's asking me to turn off the engine. The idiot soldier was running the edge of his palm across his throat. "The altitude's fine." "A couple more feet to the left," Reacher commanded. "That's it. They've got him." Meanwhile, our counsellor was watching the rope attachment process with interest. I added throttle to remove the slack and give the Huey a chance to level over the Ishak on the 4 cables with equal tension. Once in this position, I added more gas to lift the 1,000-pound Ishak into the air. As the weight shifted to the Huey, the carrier propeller slammed its blades loudly through the air. The load hovered above the ground, and the instruments showed I had enough power reserve for takeoff. The control stick was tight as I fought the drift. The fuselage of a helicopter in flight resembles the tip of a pendulum, whose top is the point of contact between the propeller shaft and its hub. An addition in the form of a suspended weight turns the entire structure into the lightness of such a complex pendulum. Coordinating the movements of two pendulums at once requires a lot of experience. For example, if you push the control stick forward, the rotor disc will also tilt forward and carry the fuselage like a stone on a rope. With a suspended load attached, the fuselage oscillations are equalized by the weight of the load. The helicopter behaves as if it does not want to fly forward. At such times, there is a danger that the pilot will push the control stick forward even more to overcome the resistance. If the inertia of the two pendulums collide, the car will spiral downwards. If you quickly pull the control stick backward to level the machine, the fuselage will swing backward first, and then the cargo with its speed. If the cargo stops its witchy movements and loses inertia, it can get stuck on the ground. What's my point? When I started moving forward for takeoff, I wasn't going to stop. God, I'm stuck here, 20 feet above his head, and he's showing me to hover. I was ready to land back down to strangle the soldier. The cargo is in the air, Sir Reacher reported. I pitched forward slowly so as not to push the pendulums together. The guide, meanwhile, insisted, frantically making inarticulate gestures. The heavy weight swung toward him, accelerating. I expected to knock the soldier down, but he dodged at the last moment. As we gained altitude, Liz ordered us into manual mode and reached up to the ceiling panel to fuse the cargo's electrical release switch. We used to put it on safety when we were hovering close to the ground, because the pilot could accidentally hit the switch on the control stick and drop the cargo in a hurry. At altitude, it was put in manual mode to prevent the cargo from accidentally detaching, as sometimes happened. The day before, someone in our company had dropped a donkey from 3,000 feet, and the grunts were still pissed off about it. The car looked like King Cong had walked all over it. I could feel the tension as the Ishak fought the wind while flying into the Gulf area. All I had to do to land was to drop speed in time and keep the helicopter elevated. Liz engaged the uncoupling safety. I entered a high hover, keeping the Ishak 10 feet off the ground, and slowly flew up to the receiver at the repair base. I watched him suspiciously, but the guy knew his business. When I felt the Ishak land, he gave the command to unhitch, and I pushed in the button on the handle that was responsible for the knot holding the cables. Soared into the sky as the load unhooked, but I didn't fight it, just added speed, putting the car into a near vertical climb, and turned right. Cowboy Liz said, but when I looked at him, he was smiling. The lull in combat continued, but I didn't lack for flying 8 or 9 hours a day. Sometimes I flew more, for there was utter despondency in our tent camp. Boredom was rushing the cavalry, turning 20,000 men into a mere rabble stuck somewhere in Vietnam with no idea why or wherefore. On top of that, the news was increasingly filled with anti-Vietnam War comments. The whole company was in a very somber mood, and these activists were pouring salt on the wound. Nobody likes to be fooled, especially if they have to risk their lives. I'd rather shoot one of these assholes than a fucking gook, yelled Connors. He threw the magazine to the floor. The freaks think they're the smartest. Did you read this? He was addressing everyone at once. It was late, but I was awake and writing a letter lying on my bunk. This bitch says the Americans sold out Ho Chi Minh. He says the Gooks used to be our allies and we let a British colonel give South Vietnam back to the French. He fell silent. I looked up. He was sitting on his bunk in shorts with a can of beer in his hand, staring angrily at the tarpaulin wall behind me. His face brightened when he noticed me. Have you heard about this, Mason? First time, I answered. Do you think it's true? He asked me hopefully. He thought I was an educated man, for I had spent 2 years at the university. No, I answered. The siege of Plaim in the Nha Drang Valley ended on October 27th. For weeks, the Vietnamese People's Army had waged frantic attacks. 6,000 soldiers dressed in a single uniform had pounded the tiny camp 20 miles from the Cambodian border, launching raids mixed with mortar and rocket-propelled grenade attacks. They had gotten within 40 yards of the camp, using trenches they had managed to dig right under the noses of the military advisors a few weeks earlier. Within the triangular camp were hundreds of Montagnard mercenaries who were fighting under the guidance of the military advisors of the Special Forces. A support force of tanks, artillery, and 1,000 Republic of Vietnam Army infantrymen had been dispatched to the camp from the II Corps base, which was 30 miles north near Pleiku. Several helicopters from a neighboring airborne company brought up 250 South Vietnamese Rangers. Our Air Force then began bombing and strafing. In 600 sorties, 20 airplanes were hit and 3 destroyed. A helicopter was shot down, and an American sergeant died trying to reach it. When the location ran out of supplies, the Air Force dropped pallets of food and ammunition directly into the camp. 2 men were killed by a pallet that fell from the sky. Another pallet went through the roof of the mess hall. The enemy suffered heavy casualties and were forced to retreat. Time praised us for being able to scare them off, as the U.S. 1st Squadron forces approached on a glancing flight. The Viet Minh reluctantly retreated from Plaim. "They're going west, straight into Cambodia," moaned the commander of one of the cavalry platoons. "Now we'll have to chase the bastards all over the jungle." He was right. Along with Shaker, a spirit of activity burst into our midst. The indefatigable black captain watched intently as we packed for the move to Pleiku. I noticed him suppress a smile when he saw the commotion his appearance in the tent caused. The smile quickly flew off his lips as several pairs of eyes stared at him in anticipation. Another announcement. He quickly lowered his eyes. "How the fuck do you live?" he suddenly rumbled. "Look at this." He kicked a clump of dirt. I was about to explain to him that we didn't have time to reassemble the floor when Connors opened his mouth. "Yes, sir." "Nay." "What?" Shaker's staring at Connors. "That's right, sir. We like it very much," Connors glowered. "And what makes you think so, Mr. Connors?" Shaker asked, smiling involuntarily. He liked Connors. "Well, sir, I can't speak for the others, but I smoke like a locomotive. And this place is like a big ashtray on the inside. You can throw out an ashtray when you want to. Great." Shaker covered his mouth with his hand, hiding a smile. He quickly pulled himself back when he turned around and saw us staring at him. We were staring because he was smiling, and because he'd come into the tent when he had bad news. "You can make up the floor when we get back from Pleiku." "Okay, that's not why I'm here," he continued. "Where's Riker?" Here Len peeked out from behind the rice mat that separated our bunks. "What the hell is that?" Shaker pointed to the mat. "Personal space." "Wow," he opened his mouth to comment but changed his mind. "Riker, you and Mason have an assignment. You'll be flying the tactical commanders of the grunts in a helicopter. Around Plaim. Pack up, they're already late. The rest of us have resumed packing. Throw your gear in the communal pile. We'll take them to Pleiku." He turned to leave. "Anyway, get your asses to the staff tent. They'll explain everything there." "How long do we have to fly with the grunts?" Riker asked. Shaker stopped at the door. "How the hell should I know?" he said sharply. Then he added in a calmer tone. "Just today, I guess." And he left. I sat in the left chair and watched the road through the lower window drop. Counted 4 bridges blown up. Riker had never flown to Pleiku before, so I led the tour for him, checking the tattered map. This place on the right side of the Mang Yang passage, I moved my finger to a point, is called the Frenchman's Cemetery. Riker nodded. "The big green mountain?" Ha. "I see it. A couple miles away?" "Yeah, that's right." I pressed the comm button and looked over the black edge of the dashboard. I was comfortable with my hand on my knee when I wasn't using the internal comms. There was no floor communication switch on the left side, so I had to grasp the control knob and flick the trigger switch to talk to Len. I switched on. "When we fly up, you can see hills that look like graves all along the side of that mountain." "I can see it. Right here, near this pass, the French lost hundreds of soldiers in a major ambush." "When?" "I don't know. 10 or 12 years ago? Holy shit." "And up ahead, where the road goes southwest, is where those guys were shot down last month. 50th caliber." Riker nodded and added a step. "Huey's gone 500 feet up." "Do you think it's still dangerous up there?" I asked. "Nope. Do you?" No, I breathed a sigh of relief. After the pass, we'll be halfway to Plake, which is already 20 miles from the Gulf area. On the horizon? At 10 o'clock. Yes, that's Pleiku, I confirmed. By the way, there's a big airfield in front of you in New Pleiku. Air Force and I Corps bases are there. A couple miles from it you can see a village. Partly it is the territory of the councillors' Camp Holloway. For a few minutes we walked slowly in the cold air above the pass. I looked under my feet, watching the change of road. Climbing steeply up one side of the pass, it flowed gently down through the foothills to the rustling grass of the plains in the distance. Camp Holloway was about 10 miles from the western boundary of a long valley extending from Kontum, 30 miles to the north, to the Chupong Forest Range, 40 miles to the southwest. The muddy Yar Drang River, which skirts the whole massif on its way to Cambodia, gave its name to the valley itself. It's so beautiful on this side of the pass, Riker said. You can't argue with that. Tall grass rustled the hills. Where the roads and ravines had been, the bare earth was a reddish hue. Except for the 2 American camps and the village of Pleiku ahead, the whole area seemed uninhabited. We were very close to the councillors' camp. We have to land 5 miles south of that airfield at Holloway, I explained. Where will our company camp? Riker asked, looking out the triangular window. I checked the map. See that big field between Holloway and New Pleiku. Right there? Aha! Turkey Farm. Riker and I sat down at the very edge of the sea of tents. This was the tea plantation grunts camp, and it was adjacent to a real plantation owned by some Frenchmen. The commander we were to take, Grumpy 6, was a colonel, a so-called Eagle colonel. He ran toward us, crouching beneath the blades. He was followed by 2 captains, one wearing the epaulets of a pilot. They climbed aboard and grabbed the communications headphones the assistants held out. While they tuned the frequency, the pilot captain slid between our seats and pointed to the point on the map where we needed to go, then gave a thumbs up, giving us permission to take off. Riker lifted the Huey and sped forward, nose pecking. As we gained altitude, I turned to watch. Grumpy 6 and the co-captain were sitting on an undivided bench facing me. Microphone cords ran from their headphones to a whole bunch of radio equipment that stood on the floor in front of them. Another captain, who had been sent as an aviation liaison with Grumpy 6, was sitting upright on the floor with his back to me. His job was to explain to the grunts how to properly utilize the aircraft and their respective crews. The infantry commander and his assistant were studying a laminated map attached to a square board balanced on the assistant's lap. They were conversing over a separate communications system, and the assistant was making notes on the map with a wax pencil. Grumpy 6 was constantly switching between channels. I tried to listen, but I didn't know what frequencies he was using. Every once in a while he'd hit a channel I was listening to. Red Dog 1, Grumpy 6. In the call sign, the number 6 always meant the commander, the big shot. Red Dog 1 was the call sign of one of his subordinates, probably the lieutenant who led the group through the jungle below us. Yes, sir. Report. No contact. Moving on course 180. Roger. Go ahead, over and out. He quickly switched to another channel. The commander was very focused. Down below, between the bushes and trees, up to their necks in the grass, there were thousands of soldiers trying their best to catch up with the retreating North Vietnamese army. If it weren't for my love of flying, the task would have been extremely boring. We just flew by compass, along and across over the southern part of the valley. The captain pilot would plug into our communications channel and relay new coordinates from the words of Grumpy 6. At the very end of the southern part of the valley, about 8 miles north of the Chupong Massif, Grumpy 6 had prearranged an advanced command post on top of a lonely hill. At about 2 o'clock, the captain dictated the coordinates to us and asked us to take them there. The valley from the hill to the array was a flat plain covered with tall grass. It ended where the Yar Drang River changed course, and the land rose sharply to a vast plateau of steep tree-covered mountains that dropped gently down the other side to Cambodian territory. At the very beginning of the climb was a series of sharp, jungle-covered hills that snaked up into the massif. It was at the foot of these hills that the supposed enemy base was located. Riker flew up to a lone hill with tall, scorched grass and a few trees. After making a circle and marking the desired landing point, he made a landing approach. As we flew over the edge of a steep cliff covered with tall bushes, a gust of wind from our blades blew one of the camping tents away. The owner of the tent began scrambling through the tall grass trying to catch his lodging. We landed about 100 feet from the tent, dropping into the grass to the floor level of the cargo bay. The pilot captain jumped out and ran the edge of his palm across his throat, ordering Riker to jam the Huey. Grumpy Six staggered toward the tent. His second assistant reported, "We'll be here for about an hour. You can have lunch in the meantime." Thanks for that. This command flight wasn't bad. At least we weren't taking part in any attacks. As the propeller slowly lost speed, Reacher pulled a container of dry rations out of the rear compartment. I passed under the propeller, which would not stop, and headed for the guy who was without a tent. He was trying to remove his dwelling from a bush at the bottom of the hill, standing shoulder deep in the grass. The tent got caught on something, but he finally got it free. Clutching it to his chest, he strode toward me. "I'm sorry," I said. "We didn't see you on the approach." "No, it's all right, sir." He smiled and tossed the tent down next to a bush. "I didn't want to be seen. I've organized a little camouflage here." He pointed haughtily to a pile of twigs near his mangled tent. "It's not the most sheltered spot." I nodded toward the Huey. "You're on the leeward side, so we'll always fly past you when we land." I hadn't even thought of that. He wiped his forehead with the edge of a t-shirt he'd straightened out of his pants. "What's stopping you from sitting like this?" He held his palm in the air and made a sharp downward movement. "Vertical," I translated. "Vertical. Doesn't a helicopter do that?" "Only in extreme cases," I explained. "But it's dangerous. We prefer to maintain forward motion so that we can auto-rotate in case of power loss. But now that we know where you've decided to land, we can come down a little sharper, so you don't get blown away by the wind. But any other helicopter coming in here to land will blow you back up again." "Thank you for explaining that. I'd better rebuild everything here and reinforce the tent." He smiled and went back to work. "Beef and noodles or chicken?" Riker stood next to him. "Neither. That's all we got." "Chicken." Riker tossed me a box and sat down on the edge of the cargo hold. Riker, Reacher, the machine gunner, and I piled into the Huey and started eating. Grumpy Six sat in the staff tent and made plans. After lunch, I took a walk. There were 5 of the 15 hill-dwelling grunts loitering around the tent. I said hello and sat down on a box of dry rations. Through the tent door, I could see the wooden legs of a map tripod behind the military men who had stripped down to their t-shirts. The meeting of Grumpy Six and his subordinates continued. Out of the tent came a Vietnamese soldier dressed in a camouflage uniform with large pockets that belonged to the Vietnamese Rangers. He was not a ranger, however, but an interpreter. He was smiling. A smile is the easiest way to hide feelings. I beckoned him over to me, glad to have found an interpreter. I had a chance to find out how the locals felt about this war. The cavalry was so far removed from the Army of the Republic of Vietnam that this was the first time I'd had this chance. "Hi," I began. "Hi. I've been wanting to talk to a Vietnamese who speaks English for a long time." "Yes," he said understandingly. "Listen, how do you think we're doing here?" "Yeah," he nodded. "No, I mean, what do you personally think about it?" "Are we winning?" "Yeah, we probably are," he assured me. "How's it going?" "Mine?" Maybe he didn't understand my accent. "We're doing great." "I'm great." "I'm doing great too, thank you," he bowed slightly. I took a quick glance at the grunts' smiling faces and realized that they were well aware of the translator's extremely shitty knowledge of English. "Great," I said. "I take it this hill will be flattened into a valley today." "Yeah, probably so." "This is turning out to be fun." "Listen, they're moving all of Saigon here this weekend, so we don't have to drive so far up the hill." I heard the audience laughing. "Saigon," he nodded happily when he heard the familiar word. I was just getting into the mood when a private came out of the tent and shouted, "Hey, Nguyen. Nguyen." The smiling, naive translator nodded and quickly ran into the tent. At least he knew his name. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we loaded into the car and flew back to the tea plantation. Grumpy Six ordered us to drop us off near a waiting jeep. We hurried to the soft fuel tank at the end of the plantation to refuel. We flew up to the command post on the hill already on our own. I made a sharper landing, and this time only the bushes flew away and the tent held. The headquarters tent. The officer on duty, a captain, showed us the outline plan of action on a large map. The main task of the second half of the day was the transportation of personnel around the valley. Detachments that came under fire needed reinforcements. During the whole day, we managed to fly all over the southern part of the valley without a single incident. Sometimes a single helicopter was safer than an entire formation. We explained this phenomenon by the fact that the enemy mistook a lone helicopter for a scout and did not open fire so as not to give away their positions. Later we learned that we were flying over crowds of Charlies that day. By late afternoon we were already dreaming of joining the company. They must have already encamped at the turkey farm and were now dining in the councillors' camp, in a real mess hall. Had managed to take a real shower. By this point we had already flown 6 hours and our strength was slowly leaving us. "Tonight you'll take the commander again," the captain told us in the command center when we landed. "Fly to this end of the valley so he can talk to his men there," he pointed to the map. "It shouldn't take more than 2 hours. When you're done, you'll have to stay at the tea plantation. The colonel will still need you." The 2 hours eventually stretched to 4, and we finished at 10 p.m. Grumpy Six drove off in his jeep, hidden behind the thousands of tents that blocked the entire field. We were left to our own devices. Len tried to hint that our company and our stuff were only 5 miles from camp, but Grumpy Six wanted us to stay. "Put your car next to the medical chopper," he ordered Len before departing. His deep voice matched his strong build. "Find the guys in that chopper and tell them to find you a bunk. Stand by, boys, I may need you." The fatigue factor of long helicopter rides is extremely high. The constant vibration, loud noise, and prolonged concentration caused commanders-in-chief to limit flying to 4 hours a day. 4 hours was considered a good amount of work, and it was 2 hours more than our jet brothers in the Air Force flew. In fact, the harsh combat reality erased these restrictions almost every day. 6 or 8 hours of flying time was commonplace in the cavalry. Len and I had just flown 10 hours with Grumpy Six, and were feeling completely exhausted. Tired to the point where we didn't want to mess around with dry rations. Instead, we decided to find a medical helicopter crew and get a bed. We found the right guys about 200 feet from their Huey in a 4-person tent. I don't know why he ordered them to look for us. "There are no extra tents here," the tall warrant officer reported. "If you want, you can sleep on a stretcher. At least not on the ground." "That would be nice," Len said. "Our flight mechanic and machine gunner can stay in the Huey." He nodded in the direction of our helicopter, hidden in the twilight. "The 4 of us will have a hard time in there." "Well, you can set up right here," he pointed with his flashlight to the ground in front of the tent. "We can give you a tent so you'll have some shelter." "Nah, that'll do," Len said. "It's not supposed to rain tonight. I don't want to bother with this shit." I looked up at the starry sky. It was inky black, all dazzling diamonds. The stars looked exactly the same here as they did on the other side of the world. Polaris was closer to the horizon. The Big Dipper was in place. Orion. As a child, I studied the stars very often. I never gave up hope of seeing the constellation of the Southern Cross. Len had approached me for the umpteenth time. "Bob, are you all right?" "Yeah, just studying the constellations." "Look, I don't know about you, but I'm so tired. I'm ready to pass out standing up. I'm going to get a stretcher." "I'll go with you." But first I went to our chopper to let Reacher and the gunner know where we'd be spending the night. I got the stretcher from the dust bag. Dustbuster was the call sign for the Medivac chopper. I had gotten into the habit of calling all objects by their call signs. I took the stretcher and set off toward the big dustbuster in the direction of the tent. While we were getting situated, the dust collector pilots crawled outside to chat a bit. I was more quiet. While Len and the tall warrant officer discussed their recent adventures, I sat on the stretcher and feigned interest, assuming that they could somehow see my face, although I couldn't see theirs. I sat like that for a minute and then leaned back to look up at the stars. The back of my palm hit something cold and sticky just behind my head. I stood up quickly and asked, "What is it?" The co-pilot from the dustbuster crew pointed a flashlight at the stretcher. There was a piece of human meat reddening on the green tarp. "They need a good scrubbing," he explained. "It sticks to death." He shrugged nonchalantly and walked over to the stretcher. It was holding firmly. Finally, he managed to pull it off with his fingers, and the piece went flying into the bushes. I didn't want to sleep anymore, so I listened. One of our vehicles flew into a hot landing zone and picked up 4 wounded, Warren said. Everything was going right until they took off, right over the machine guns. Charlie made a sieve out of them, killed the whole crew and all the wounded after they went down. His comrade with the flashlight picked up. And we got hit while defending plane, he began, wiping his hand on his pants. We landed too close to the trenches the Gooks had long ago dug right next to plane. The guys inside the camp didn't know the Charlies were sitting so close. Anyway, we went to pick up the wounded. They met us on the way up, killed the machine gunner. We had to jump out and run. We hid in the camp. He paused, and his comrade grunted approvingly. That's why we don't land in hot zones anymore. Charlies think the Red Cross on board is a target. The bastards don't respect the Geneva Accords at all. The Geneva Accords? Well, yeah, the gist of the agreement is that you can't touch medics, even air medics, the shorter Warren explained. I don't think the Charlies signed those agreements. The US certainly didn't. I cut in. I felt an irresistible urge to argue. The agreements forbid the use of shotguns, but in our company there are several boxes with them to protect the territory. I cited this fact to counterbalance Charlie's misdemeanor against Dust Collector. I've always enjoyed acting as the devil's advocate, and once again I got into character defending the enemy. Whose side are you on, anyway? The tall Warren asked. Sounds like it, I explained. But if neither of the adversaries signed any agreements, then they both have no right to accuse the other of violating those agreements. They do if the adversary is a bunch of fucking gooks, the tall Warren said angrily. The prosecution made an interesting point. The warrant was also 40 pounds heavier than I was. Well, I said, that's a valid point of view too. I think the rules of war are bullshit, Riker said. I couldn't see his face, but I knew he was smiling. I agree, the tall Warren nodded. War is war, and we must endure it and go home. I hope we can do that soon, Riker said. If we capture the North Vietnamese army before they get to Cambodia, we'll give them a head start. Riker paused, and the tent owners murmured approvingly. And when we give them a light, they'll want to surrender and offer peace, it seems to me. They'll want to give up and go home. I'm in favour, I seconded. It was 12:30. Everyone was tired, and we decided that we should put off winning the war until tomorrow morning. I rested my head at the other end of the stretcher so that I couldn't see the stain from the piece of meat. Lying on my back, I went back to gazing at the stars. A cool thing to do. My thoughts drifted to the other side of the world, to where Patience was now supposed to be setting Jack down at the dinner table. The last time I'd seen him, he was 1 year and 2 months old and just starting to get on his feet. He liked to play the don't do anything mummy tells you to do game. Time to eat, Jack, she would say. No, he laughed and ran off to the bedroom. Jack, sit down at the table. Jack giggled in the bedroom, climbing onto our high bed. Patience stood in the doorway and smiled, watching him.